I've been playing and talking about Sonic games for as long as I can remember. And while the franchise could sadly be infamous for some of the bad ones, there are way more good games that can iron out the bad ones. People just choose to not forget about the games that failed for the sake of comedy because apparently only the quote-unquote bad games matter to people like IGN, Twitter users, and such. Side tangent. But no doubt about it, I gotta do a lot more than just telling you I'm a Sonic fan in order to prove that. And what better way of doing so, you may ask? Well, of course, by giving you all my top 10 favorite Sonic games of all time. Interestingly, I did post a video like this back in 2020, and looking back at it now,
On this list, you'll just be seeing some Sonic games I would declare which are probably the best, in my opinion. So, with no further ado, let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my top 10 favorite Sonic games. Number 10, Sonic Forces.
Bullshit! Mother bull. If I ever had one!
Yep, shows how far I've come in the content creating business, does it? But there's no time like the present to redo some of my past mistakes, right? Before we do that though, I obviously gotta address some things like in every other top 10 video on YouTube. I haven't played every single Sonic game in existence, yet. And that's because some are either hard to find / play, or I just don't care enough to play the game. So you're obviously not seeing Shadow the Hedgehog on this list. Though I did play most of the essential ones and practically every mainline game, so I'd say I'm more than qualified to make this video. I do wish to play every Sonic game one day, but it's gonna be quite the task for me at the moment. So chances are you might not see a game you could be expecting, or you might be surprised as to what game you see here. Of course, this is all my opinion, and basically my perspective towards these games, in case that wasn't obvious already from the get-go. And if you're one of those people that get upset about your favorite Sonic game not being on here, boo freaking who. This list will practically describe how a Sonic game should be defined as, from my point of view. Alright, now that we've got all that settled, let's do it to it! Welcome to my top 10 best Sonic the Hedgehog games. Well, this is oddly appropriate. I haven't met a single person that can say Sonic Generations is a bad game without keeping a straight face, and I don't think I ever will. But why isn't it higher on the list? Well, we'll get to that in a bit. For now, we gotta talk about what makes this a worthy Sonic game. For one, it is super fun to pick up and play at any time. Of course, most of my joy comes from the modern Sonic stages, as they're obviously one of the game's biggest highlights, according to many. That's not to say the classic Sonic stages are bad, as they are par for the course, but they can be a bit tedious throughout your playthrough. Planet Wisp Act 1. Ugh, I'll never be able to get those awful memories I've had with this stage out of my head. Another thing that not a lot of people talk about are the side challenges in between each act, and that's kind of for good reason, as they all end up being very hit and miss. The worst one obviously being Vector Pick Up the Beat. I was literally questioning my life decisions once I got up to this point when trying to fully complete this game back in the day. Ignoring that, I can't possibly ignore the pleasant boss fights the game offers, with my two favorites being Shadow and Egg Dragoon. Even so, I can definitely appreciate all the other boss fights too, because of how action-packed and blood-pumping they all feel, like most other Sonic boss fights. Except the Time Eater, for obvious reasons. I don't exactly have much to say for the 3DS version of Generations, even though that was the first version of Gens I've ever played in my lifetime, except for it having a much better take on the Time Eater final boss, and that it gave classic Sonic the homing attack, because he needs to blend in with modern Sonic, I guess? I just really wish this was the only time Sega and Sonic Team felt the need to rehash stages and thought it was okay to have a huge amount of nostalgia pandering for this franchise, when that is so not the case. Because if it was, I guarantee you I would have been a lot more leaning towards the game, and I would have placed it a lot higher on my list. After all, like I said in my Generations video back in February, this game was the start of the devs' obsession with using the same stages again and again. And the story is very bland and non-existent for a time travel story. But hey, number 10 ain't so bad in my book. So while nowadays I'm not as caring for this game as I once was, it's kinda hard to imagine a timeline where this game never existed. Let's just hope this game doesn't get overshadowed by the new campaign in Sonic X Shadow Generations. It wasn't easy, but I finally managed to say the title of the game without throwing up in my mouth.
Hey Sonic! Enjoy your future! It's gonna be great!
Well, what do you know? Another Sonic game I hugely adored as a kid, but as I got older, I witnessed a bit more flaws this time around. Hell, the only reason why this game is over generations for me is for the simple fact that Colors is entirely original. In fact, this was the last mainline Sonic game to be fully unique and original with all of its stages. Not a single sign of Green Hill or Chemical Plant in sight. So props to you, Sonic Colors, for doing the impossible. That may sound like I'm being harsh, but let me tell ya, I do have a soft spot for both the Wii and DS versions of Colors. The Wii version is filled to the brim with interesting levels and locations, while the DS version is entirely 2D, making it feel like Sonic Rush's third long-lost brother. I can even appreciate Sonic Colors Ultimate for what they were trying to do with it, to some extent. As we all know, this was the game to introduce the Wisps, which have become either a positive or a negative reception to the series according to the fan feedback. I think they're great in this game, but they definitely started to lose their glow in games like Lost World, TSR, and, you guessed it, Forces. My favorite Wisps have gotta be Laser, Drill, and Frenzy, which are absolutely fun to use. Of course, not every Wisp is fun to use, though. Cube is for sure the worst of the bunch for being too slow for my tastes. But can we talk about the game's atmosphere? Because to me, all of the worlds are immaculate and pleasing to the eye, with each having their own fun gimmicks and assets. Funny enough, Aquarium Park is one of my favorite Sonic levels of all time, and normally I despise water levels, especially in Sonic games. Sweet Mountain, Planet Wisp, and Asteroid Coaster are fun to roam around and look at as well. And while some levels are just copy and paste and filled with one too many 2D sections, the level design truly peaks during the first few levels you run into. But alas, this was also the start of Sonic games not being serious or very story-heavy, and instead focusing more on goofy, random comedy with less and less action and suspense. Even though I can unironically laugh at the no copyright law in the universe and Baldy McNose hairline, I do agree that all the jokes are extremely corny for the most part. A story can have humor in it, but when humor is the main priority of the story, it can end up being a mixed bag, which is where this game lands in my opinion. Also, all the bosses in the Wii version suck, except for the final boss. Enough said. Thankfully, the DS version has a lot more story and less cheesy dialogue, along with much better bosses. Sonic's friends even show up, which gives you fun little side missions to complete, adding more replay value, which is a huge plus. The DS version overall offers more content, including the Nega Mother Wisp boss fight you unlock once you collect all the Chaos Emeralds. Why the hell they didn't do this for the Wii version is way beyond me. Other than that, when Sonic Colors is reaching its highs, and for the stars, the game is remarkably splendid to me, and I'm glad to include it on the list. Nobody should be surprised that Mania made its way on the list, as it does for everyone else's top 10 from the looks of it. But can you really blame people for loving this game so much? Not at all. The art style, sprite work, music, and level design are breathtaking. The song Friends was so charming that I knew I had to make it the background song for the intro to this video. 2D Sonic games really should stick with having this kind of style moving forward. It captures practically everything right with Sonic, specifically the classic games. Although some of you might be confused on why I placed this game over Colors in terms of being not as unique and original with its levels, and that's because I'd say this game gets a slight pass for being fully 2D, being more pleasing to the eye, and just being more fun to play and master. Plus, the few original stages we do get in Mania are fun all around, examples being Studiopolis, Press Garden, Mirage Saloon, and Titanic Monarch. I don't even mind some of the stages like Green Hill, Chemical Plant, Flying Battery, Hydro City, and Metallic Madness because of how gorgeous they all look here. At least they tried with what they got. Plus, the special stages for this game are the best ones for any classic Sonic game. It's rare for me to have fun with a Sonic special stage, but they surely made it work with Mania. All of this just makes me shocked that there isn't a Sonic Mania 2 because of just how much fun I've had with this game from start to finish. I do have to mention that you get to play as Mighty and Ray if you bought the Plus edition of the game like I did, but I'm gonna be honest, I didn't like playing as them that much. Playing as one of the each isn't really anything to write home about since they kinda make the game too easy, and they didn't really add much to the game itself if you ask me. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles are obviously great to play as though, and I don't think there's a single tedious boss fight in this game as they're all pretty decent at best. The two that really hit home for me are located in Hydro City Act 2 and in Egg Reverie Zone. Again, the major downside is the lack of new level themes, and that's about it. This could have been up there as the best 2D Sonic, or even the best Sonic game if it had fully original stages. Still hoping for a sequel to what I consider a spectacular game. I've noticed over the years people like to speculate which game is better, Sonic 2 or Sonic 3, and TBH, I think Sonic 2 is a bit weaker. That's not to say it's a bad game by any means, because it's one of the best 2D games in the series, without a doubt. Every zone has a perfect blend of speed and platforming, which makes for a fun and smooth ride. That is, except for Metropolis, which shifted the difficulty a little too quick for many folks, including myself. And don't even get me started on Death Egg Zone. This level actually made me cry several years back because of how much of a chore it all felt. 0 rings for the whole damn act? What were they thinking? I would have settled for just 1! Casino Night was also a bit troublesome, but I didn't mind it as much. Now, as all sequels for games should, they introduce all kinds of new features and mechanics, and Sonic 2 went to the moon with that idea, which I can give major credit for. It gave us the Spin Dash, Supersonic, and most importantly, Tails. All of these have been mainstays for the franchise and shine a lot in this game, which further proves that Sonic 2 should not be forgotten by anyone because of how much it gave us. But the special stages are quite a mixed bag for me. The first couple of ones are fun to go through, but as you'd expect, they get more difficult as you go on. Thankfully, Sonic Origins made some major improvements for the special stages, so I'd say they're fine now. It is kinda weird how this game doesn't have an extra final boss once you get all the emeralds, but it doesn't bring the game down or anything. I just thought of it as a slight head-scratcher. Speaking of bosses, all of them are fairly competent and, for the most part, fun at best. So, while I feel this game does kinda hold back in comparison to 3 and Knuckles, there's a lot to like about it, and you can definitely call this one of the best games in the entire franchise. Speaking of... Here we have Sonic 3, but what more can I say for this game that hasn't already been said? It's the classic 2D Sonic game with the most story, and as you'd imagine, I'm combining both Sonic 3 and Sonic Knuckles for this since it's obviously all meant to be one epic adventure. Goes without saying, but Sonic 3 definitely peaked in terms of quality on the Sega Genesis with graphics, music, and gameplay. It just sticks out to me the most in the trilogy, and who could forget about our good buddy Knuckles, who's only one of my all-time favorite Sonic characters. Makes me kinda sad that he got an awful first impression in this game by stealing Sonic's emeralds when we first see him. You dumb knucklehead! 2 things that make me love this more than Sonic 2 is that it has more playable characters and it lets you save your progress. Much like everyone and their mother, Ice Cap Zone has my favorite music and level design in the entire game. The music is so godlike that it breaks my heart every time I play the Origins version of Sonic 3, which doesn't feature the same song due to copyright. Which was produced by Michael Jackson, by the way. The only zone that kind of holds this game back for me is Marble Garden Zone, of course, for being too boring. Plus, I don't think Carnival Night Zone is as bad as people say. Yeah, I know the barrel makes absolutely no sense, but once you get the hang of it, it starts to become really decent. Let's not forget about the bosses, since they're a key factor into what makes this game stick out more from the other games, the highlights being Big Arms and Giant Egg Robo. It will never not be funny to me how you can cheese the giant egg robo-boss by spin-dashing the fingers. And believe it or not, I actually found the special stages to be fun, which again is rare to say for a special stage in a Sonic game. Another thing that this game introduced was the Super Emeralds and Hyperforms, which I only obtained with Sonic and not Tails or Knuckles yet. But yeah, this game just holds a very special place in my heart since it's the classic Sonic game I've had the most amount of fun with. Whenever I would boot up Sonic Classic Collection back then, 3 and K is the one I immediately jump into because of how exhilarating the game makes me feel. If you somehow haven't played this game, you're definitely missing out, and I have no idea what is wrong with you. So yeah, if I for some reason needed to complete a Sonic game, just give me Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and I'm ready to go. I can only imagine people actually being upset with me that Advance 3 is taking the spot for the best game in the trilogy. Honestly, it was hard trying to pick which Advance game would make it in the list because to me, all 3 games kind of blend in with one another if I'm being for real. And that's because of one simple fact: they're all tedious. But thanks to my tingling nostalgia sense, Advance 3 was able to make its way on the list. I can go on and on about my memories of spending hours looking for the Chow after coming home from kindergarten back in the day, but to keep things plain and simple, we'll just get into what makes this game worth playing. I don't understand how people can consider this the worst game in the trilogy when it does plenty of stuff right and is a lot more forgiving, unlike the first 2. Fun fact, I did own a copy of this game back in the day for my old Game Boy Advance SP, but thanks to one of my stupid cousins who were raging at a level and accidentally threw it on the floor, I was never able to play this again. That is until I started high school and randomly decided to run through all 3 Advance titles. And I can confidently say that I've had the most fun with the 3rd game. I really loved the character swapping gimmick and had fun making the most random and awkward teams possible like Knuckles and Cream, Amy and Tails, and Sonic and Cream. Why the hell haven't any other Sonic games tried this? Plus, this is the only game in the trilogy to feature voice clips for the characters, which instantly makes it the best one. And there's actually a somewhat story in the game. Sonic and Co. of course once again try to thwart Dr. Eggman's plans, and Eggman creates a new machine called Gemroll. He then uses the Chaos Emeralds to turn him into Ultimate Gemroll, but then he betrays Eggman, leaving Sonic and Eggman to team up and take him out, and then by the end of it, Tails fixes Gemroll, who becomes nice and ends up living with Cream and Vanilla. Yeah, none of the advanced games really hit home in terms of story, but they are 3 small spin-off games, so I'd give them a pass. And I gotta say, Sonic games really peaked in terms of level theming in the 2000s. You've got Route 99, Ocean Base, Toy Kingdom, Twinkle Snow, and Cybertrack to name a few. I even like Sunset Hill Zone, which was a nice little throwback to Green Hill at the time before Sonic Team started shoving it in random spots for almost every new game now. Although I'm not really a fan of the hub worlds because to me it's pretty bare bones and useless. That's kinda to be expected for a hub in a 2D game, but this is one of those instances where it doesn't really work. Generations and even Superstars' hubs somehow did a better job with it, but Advance 3's hubs feel like a whole entire short and tedious level that's kinda tricky to navigate. But that's really one of the few things I presumably don't like about the game, along with the unnecessary amount of death pits you can fall into. The bosses are all flashy and inventive as well. But we all know the real reason why the bosses in Advance 3 are good, and that's because of Eggman going or and of course, you're going to pay for this! Unlike the first 2 games, the special stages aren't that hard to access. All you have to do is find hidden Chow and hidden keys, and find a big spring in the hub worlds. And the special stages themselves are pretty simple on top of that. Believe me, I can understand the hate the advanced titles get, but Sonic Advance 3 is one where I can actually say, don't knock until you try. Once you get the hang of it, I'd say you're in for a fun time, even if you're not going for all the emeralds. Here's a game pretty much everyone despised when it released, while I was the odd one out considering that I loved everything about it. Like other Sonic games around the time, people were way too quick to judge Sonic and the Black Knight and used the games before this one as an excuse to call it bad without giving it a chance. And for the people that did play the game, they never got past the first level and immediately shrugged it off as mediocre at best. Even back then, I always thought people saying the controls are whack were just too lazy to swing a single remote, and you don't even have to swing that hard for it to work. I'm guessing those people are still butthurt from not knowing how to utilize a single controller while playing a game like Secret Rings. Speaking of which, this has been said to death by everyone, but this game is a massive improvement from Secret Rings. Not only for the controls and gameplay, but for the story, environments, characters, and practically everything else as well. And Sonic's characterization in this game was at an all-time high. He's got his usual cocky, upbeat, and adventurous personality that we all love him for, but halfway through the game he grows to become a more noble knight with his trusty sword Caliburn, who's quite the pep talker in this game. Not only that, but like how others point out, Jason Griffith was at his best in this game. Plus, the story persuades a nice example of self-determination and living life to the fullest in the time that you have. Sonic himself says this at the end of the game once you defeat Dark Queen Merlina. That is how you write Sonic's character. And to think after this game, we got Colors. Say what you will, but for me it's always a treat to see Sonic in these dark, gritty, and realistic looking locations like Deep Woods, Titanic Plain, Crystal Cave, Molten Mine, etc. Not to mention the bosses are quite engaging despite being a bit on the short side of things. And once you defeat King Arthur a second time, you're able to play as Shadow, Knuckles, and Blaze, aka Lancelot, Gawain, and Percival. And while they're not the best to play as, it was great to play as other characters besides Sonic with unique abilities and attacks. Also, the composers really went all out with the music to make it fit with the theme and nature of the game. While we're on the topic of OST, Crush 40 knocked it out of the park with this game. Songs like Night of the Wind, Through the Fire, Fight the Night, and even Live Life make way for some of my favorite vocal tracks in the entire franchise. Even the final boss theme, With Me, goes incredibly hard. I'm just so sad that we might never get another Sonic storybook game again, given the reception this game got back in 2009. What a shame. I would have loved to see where these games could have gone from here. At least it ended appropriately. With that said, let's march our way to the top 3. How can I not place the very first video game I've played in the top 3? You heard right. Sonic Rush has done so much for me in the past 19 years of my existence. It was the game to introduce me to one of the best franchises of all time, and started my passion and addiction towards video games. So how do I feel 19 years later about the first Sonic game on Nintendo DS? Well, let me just say that I had every right to love this game as much as I did when I was a mini Josh. For starters, it's the first game to feature the boost, and that's still being utilized in the franchise to this very day. And let me tell you, it's fun as all hell ramming through all the Badnik's walls and such here. Seriously, what a great game to introduce this new formula. You can pull off so much airtime and insane tricks and combos while using it in stages like Leaf Storm and Altitude Limit. Usually a mechanic like this would be a bit OP for a 2D title, but it works way better than it should in this game given how the levels are laid out with all the loops, ramps, and obstacles. And if you want to get really good at this, you basically need to master the boost, which shouldn't really take that long to get used to when you get the hang of the trick system. Plus, you'll need to fill up your boost meter if you want to access the special stages. Speaking of special stages, this is without a doubt the best version of the half-pipe from Sonic 2. Unlike the advanced games, all the special stages in Rush are fairly easy to access and pretty easy to complete. Except for the last one. Good luck getting through that without taking damage. And you can't talk about the Sonic Rush series without mentioning the best female character in the entire franchise, Maureen the Raccoon. Haha, just kidding obviously, Blaze the Cat. But I'm not kidding when I tell you, Blaze is by far the best female Sonic character. At first she's mainly focused on putting her priorities front and foremost, but later down the line she learns to rely on her friends and not always do things alone thanks to Sonic, and especially Cream. I always kind of viewed her as a female version of Shadow, except without the over-the-top angst and edge. She was also the first female character with a super form, Burning Blaze, who hasn't been used since Rush Adventure. Talk about a waste. Along with her, we also got Eggman Nega, which I don't really have much to say about because he's, as you would assume, literally just Eggman, but with a different coat of paint. And like everything else, Rush peaked in terms of bosses for 2D Sonic.
I love the designs for all of them and how they look like all kinds of animals or objects. Even the Sonic vs. Blaze fight is the pinnacle of rival battles. Although, it is weird how the boss for Huge Crisis is just a reskin of the first boss from Leaf Storm, except this time he fires missiles at you. Whoa. But my favorite boss has to go to Egg Libra because of just how fun and easy it is to take out. But the music, oh my god, the music! The OST is downright iconic to not just me but the entire fandom and even all gamers at that. I even showed the songs to my mom and even she loved it just as much as I did. Whether it being Vela Nava, or Bomber Barbera. It just saddens me how little the devs seem to care about the Rush games, and even Blaze as a whole, because they can really do a whole lot more with them if they locked in. If we're to ever get another 2D Sonic that takes place in the current modern era, it absolutely has to feature the things that made Rush the best 2D Sonic, in my eyes. Like always, I don't even care if I get flack for this. What I'm about to say for this game will always be true to me and many others as well. Nah, your eyes are not deceiving you. Sonic Frontiers is incredibly high up on my list, and I'm proud of it. Oh great, can't wait to go through all the hate comments of people calling me someone that's just there to spread toxic positivity. Well, answer me this. If you thought Sonic Frontiers was a bad game, why was it critically acclaimed? Why did it get DLC? Why was it the best-selling 3D Sonic game? And why did it win an Excellence Award in the Japan Game Awards? No need for an answer, just a thought. Anyway, the last Sonic game that I had fun with was Mania. Everything after that just felt mid at best. But now that Frontiers is here, I'm glad to confirm that I finally had a huge amount of fun with a Sonic game once more. And people really like to avoid the fact that Frontiers was the Sonic game that we needed. The game may not have been perfect, but no game is perfect. In fact, I wouldn't even want to live in a world where every game was perfect. If Frontiers was able to get the franchise up and running again, that's all that really matters to me. It could have been way worse, believe me. But now, onto the game itself. The gameplay is remarkable, and finally gave us the opportunity to become Sonic the Hedgehog. Even though I've already 100%ed the game twice, and plan to do it again, I never get tired of roaming through the Starfall Islands and pulling off lots of great jumps and speed tricks. My favorite islands definitely gotta be Kronos and Ares for just how huge and engaging they both felt when you first jump in. And I want future Sonic games to feature the skill tree from here on out because it's absolutely genius and opens doors to endless attack patterns and ideas. I do wish there were more moves to toggle with, but it's not a big problem since all the moves are easy to pull off. Oh yeah, and there's also, of course, the absolutely insane, massively over-the-top, and exhilarating boss fights against the Titans! Even after almost a year and a half, I still never get sick of the Titan battles and the music that plays during all of them. Seriously, when we were asking Supersonic to return to the main series, they couldn't have done that in any other way. Of course, even the normal music of the game is splendid as well. I just love the Kronos and Chaos Island themes, and wow, I actually care about the story in a Sonic game again. Eggman shows up on the Starfall Islands attempting to gain full control over the Ancients, but ends up being taken to cyberspace. Meanwhile, Sonic, Tails, and Amy also make their way to the islands to find the Chaos Emeralds, but they all get sucked into a wormhole, leaving Sonic the only one to escape, and sets out to find the Emeralds alone and hoping to find his friends. Now trust me, there's a lot more to the story, and what I just told you was only a preview of it all. And of course, all the voice actors, especially Roger, are easily at their best in this game. I've never really had any gripes with the new cast before this game, as I'm one to defend them, but there's no denying that they are all at their very best in their performances here. What else can I say about the game? Well, even if you don't agree with me on the fact that Frontiers isn't one of the best Sonic games, even though you don't have much reason to, you can't deny that this game is a massive step in the right direction for the entire franchise. Oh, and you also got the Big the Cat fishing minigame, which I always thought was very unneeded, but I'd take this style of fishing over whatever the hell they were smoking for the SA1 fishing stages.
And obviously the infamous cyberspace stages that still feature the same generic level themes like Green Hill, Chemical Plant, and Sky Sanctuary that only every single fan by this point is sick to death of seeing. The ones in the highway are decent at best, but of course we only get less of it because we can't have nice things. Cyberspace as a whole felt like a last-minute addition to the game. But even then, cyberspace is completely optional, minus the first one in Green Hill. Most of your fun is going to be required for the main staple of the game, being the wonderful open zone atmosphere. And I do have to mention the Final Horizon as well, which I don't exactly go back to playing that much when replaying the game, honestly. Not to say it's bad, but it's literally just Oranos Island but extended to the max, with more Kaizo puzzles and cyberspace stages. Though playing as Amy, Knuckles, and Tails again after quite a while is certainly a nice treat, and I would really look forward to that more often in the games. Both of the final bosses are neat to come back to, but the original one is a little too anticlimactic, and the second one randomly decides to become the living hell of Sonic games. Really? Was the Master King Coco trial not enough for you, Sega? But it's all worth it when we get these insane moments during the last phase of the end. Frontiers overall is definitely a Sonic game I can play at literally any point in my life, and I wouldn't mind having another game like it again. I would have loved to place this game over the one you're about to see, but the only thing that's holding it back is its lack of polish. You'll definitely notice that some portions of the game do feel a tad rushed, especially in the Final Horizon, and all of the 2D sections in this game really don't do it justice. But no matter what anyone says, I will always look at Frontiers for the huge amount of things it did right. Despite all of that, only one game can really suffice as my favorite Sonic game, or even my favorite game of all time. The time has come. Let's get to it. Unlike some other countdown videos I've done on this channel a while back, it was a teensy bit hard trying to pick through all the Sonic games I've played over the years. I did know where most of my favorite games would be ranked, but it was a bit of a toughie at some points. Thankfully, I did know which one was going to make its way to number 1 from the very beginning. No matter how many times I play it, no matter how many times I talk about it, this game always fills me with endless possibilities. Well, are you surprised? Of course you're not. If you are, what game would you have possibly expected to make it this far? Let me tell you, it's not easy for me to call something my favorite game of all time, but Sonic Unleashed is the game where I can confidently say it's a full-on masterpiece. I know I said Sonic Rush was the start of my addiction for gaming, but honestly, I think Unleashed did the exact same thing, but a million times better. This was the game that truly kicked off gaming for me, and I actually played the Wii version first, then played the 360 version a year later. I even did a full Let's Play on the game during my early years as a YouTuber, and fitting that it was the first playthrough I've ever done on this channel. Anyone that calls Sonic Unleashed an awful game can go suffer through the Master King Coco trial on extreme difficulty, because this game is why I absolutely love the entirety of the franchise so much. Where do I even start? Well, I guess with the fact that this is the most prettiest looking Sonic game ever, and the graphics were way ahead of its time. A lot of the cutscenes really prove that, especially the CGI ones, because they look phenomenal. This was a freaking Xbox 360 and PS3 game for crying out loud. Even Unleashed looks great for a 2008 Wii game. Frontiers could have been on par with this game for me, but the pop-in and lack of polish really kept it about an inch or two from Unleashed. While Sonic Rush was peak in terms of boosting in 2D spaces, the boost formula shines the most in the daytime stages of Unleashed. The game proves this when you're running across the water, grinding on rails, and just blasting through all the fences, doors, vases, enemies, etc. Whenever I would see a review of this game, more often than not, people would constantly judge the Werehog stages and call them the worst part of the game, which makes me the most confused I can ever be, considering that the night stages are actually the best part of the game. If this game was just the daytime stages, not only would we have ourselves an early access of colors, but it wouldn't have made its way on the list because of just how much charm the Werehog levels have. Plus, the combat is just the most flashy and inventive battle system for any Sonic game, period. All the insane moves you can pull off, a fierce cartwheel, a drill attack, earth shaker, body slam, pile driver, and the list goes on. Bro is a literal killing machine. And all the countries you visit here really live up to the Japanese name this game was given, Sonic World Adventure. And Eggman Land was the very last time I struggled with a level in a Sonic game until Frontiers, but I can still appreciate the effort that was put into it. The story is practically the best way of combining lighthearted comedy and seriousness all the way. This game may just have the most wholesome story for any Sonic game, which to me displays the greatness of friendship. Granted, this game does have comedy moments in it, but this is where it's properly executed and it doesn't shove it in your face, unlike the games we got afterwards. Sonic and Chip's dynamic was the best part of this whole game. Chip himself is a very fun and entertaining character. From him being hugely obsessed with a chocolate chip sundae supreme, to him explaining his origin story of being Light Gaia and it being his job to rest inside the planet. Tails, Amy, Professor Pickle, and even the human NPCs are pleasant in this game. I just adore the huge amount of world building that the humans offer when exploring the hub worlds. The one that sticks out to me the most is Egg Dragoon for sure because of just how personal the fight feels between both Sonic and Eggman. While I do enjoy the Generations version for bringing it back and fleshing it out more, the OG battle has a lot more suspense going on in it and perfectly hints to you that you're near the end of the game. Perfect Dark Gaia is also the perfect example of how to handle a supersonic boss fight. And folks like to disregard the QuickTime events but completely gloss over the sick and badass animations between some of them, especially in the Werehog boss fights. Many people talk shit about the Sun and Moon medals, which personally never really bothered me because replaying stages and finding secrets was no sweat at all. Plus, if you really despise the medal collecting, then just go play the Wii version since you earn the medals depending on how good you do in a stage. And I can understand just how overused the Werehog battle theme is, but it ironically makes me laugh because of how obnoxious it feels when attacking the enemies. Oh my lord, I cannot stop talking about the amount of joy I get when talking about this game. And I feel like an idiot for not buying a Series X a lot sooner so I can play the HD version in its entirety. If you ever want me to feel happy, then just show me Sonic Unleashed and I'll be in a good mood for 24 hours straight. It can either be the HD version, the Unleashed version, or even the Java version, and I can actually cry tears of joy. You can try as hard as you like, but no matter what anyone says, the Sonic franchise peaked when it came to this game. Sonic Unleashed, you can never disappoint me. And those are all the Sonic games that I pretty much can't live without. Much like most of my other videos, this one was a 3D blast to make. I just know I'll be greeted to some interesting takes and feedback from the Sonic fans, but at the end of the day, I'm still supporting the franchise from my point of view, much like everyone else. But it is just an honor that I was able to talk about my top 10 favorite games from one of, if not my favorite gaming franchise, right next to Mario. Of course, like every other video of fans expressing their feelings towards these games, it all came from my experiences with them, meaning that I was on complete bias mode for the entire thing. So now I'll be respectful and do the honors. What is the Sonic game you grew up with, and is it your favorite Sonic game or your favorite game in general? If you didn't see your favorite Sonic game on the list, go ahead and leave your angry comment below and I'll respond to it if I feel like it. But every Sonic fan has their own opinion, and I can respect that opinion, as long as they're not shoving their opinion in my face. But even with all of our differences, there's one thing we can all agree on. Sonic is just the coolest. Whether it being movie, classic, or modern, I'm always confident in this blue fella, and I'm praying that he never leaves us. Thanks so much for watching my top 10 favorite Sonic games, everyone. Feel free to comment, like, and subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this in the future, because doing this video really inspired me to put a lot more effort into my videos from here on out. Alright, well that'll be it. Keep running, collecting rings, destroying robots, and having the time of your lives, my friends, and let's all race towards a brighter future. Till next time, everybody.